Hi, it's Candy for Globecraft and Piccolo. I wanted to show you this cool new technique that I discovered while making this page for my son. If I zoom the camera in, you can really see the detail of this textured metal here. And I made this with just a piece of leftover cardstock and some Globecraft and Piccolo embossing powder. And I'm going to show you how to make it. It's really easy. What we're going to start with is just a piece of leftover cardstock. We're going to use the Piccolo embossing powder adhesive, and we're going to use the Piccolo embossing powders. Now this one is platinum. To make it a little easier for me to find my jars because they sit in a case, I made a little label for the top and wrote the name on it so that I don't have to read the bottle label. Piccolo embossing powders are made with a variety of granule sizes. So sometimes there's sparkle in them, sometimes there's big chunks, sometimes there's real fine particles. It depends on what color you're getting. So the first thing that you always want to do when you go to use these is just to kind of spin it a little. And this will mix it up without getting all the large particles to one end and the fine particles to another end. Also, because of the size of the particles, you really need to use the adhesive that they sell. And this is kind of like Versamark, but it's a much stronger adhesive, so it'll hold all those different size particles. And it comes in a bottle rather than a stamp pad, which I think is really convenient. And there's a little dauber top. And every time you push this down, there's a little valve in there that opens. And that is going to release the liquid. So you can see how that goes on the cardstock. So easy. When you're doing this part, you want to work kind of fast because it'll soak in, especially if you're using chipboard. It'll soak in and then you won't have that adhesive. You need it to be wet like that when you pour your powder on it. And I like to use coffee filters because they aren't staticky and I can easily dump my powder right back in my jar so I'm not wasting anything. This one's been used quite a few times, that's why there's still some left in there. So once you have your powder on there, then you're just going to heat it. And I'm using Ranger's heat tool. It looks like a hair dryer, but it is a heat gun. And when using this kind, it's not as loud and it doesn't glow as much. And it puts out kind of a different kind of heat. So you need to be really close to the powders in order to melt it. And just kind of hold it in one place and you'll start to see it melting. If you're using a traditional crafting heat tool, you want to keep 4 to 6 inches away so that you don't blow your powders all over. And it heats actually faster, but it's much louder. So you can see how this changes and it starts to take on the look of metal. And even though this is fully heated, there's still going to be some little pock marks on it. Those will go away when we apply a second coat. So I'm just heating a little section for this demo, because I don't want to, wait forever. We just need to cool it a little bit. Waving it around cools it just fine. I found that it's easier if you leave a little extra on there that you can hold on to without the embossing powders. And as soon as this is cool to the touch, then we're ready for a second layer. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're just going to take the dabber and we're going to pounce it over the top. We're going to put it in our coffee filter. And we're going to pour the powder on top. We're not going to shake it off, we're just going to gently tip off the excess. We want that powder on there. When you're embossing, like a traditional embossing with a stamp, you tap off all the excess because you don't want that to bleed on your stamp. But this we want to be thick and bulky. So we're going to keep as much of it on there as possible. So just gently tip off the excess and then you're good to go. And you're going to see how much different it looks with 2 coats versus 1 coat. It really starts to get the look of metal. For most of my pieces, I use 2 coats all the time. And if I want something extra thick, I put 3 on. And occasionally I have done 4 if I'm not getting the look that I want. You can see on the edge how raised, maybe you can see on the edge, how raised it's getting and dimensional, and that's what gives it the look of metal. So sometimes the more coats you put on, the better. In this case, for this technique, I'm going to use 3 coats because I want there to be a lot of powder for the embossing folder to really sink its teeth into and get really thick dimension. Now if this starts to bubble on you, you've got too much heat or you're too close, or you might have used too much powder, or too much adhesive. So just back away and it'll level itself right out. And you can see now how much thicker and smoother and beautiful that is, just like metal. And then I would do this a 3rd time before making my paper. But I have one already done, so I can show you how that works. This one has been coated 3 times and is a much larger piece. So what I'm going to do next is take an embossing folder. This one happens to be from Sizzix. The one that I used, the gears, that was a Tim Holtz one. And I'm just going to tuck it in like you would any paper and make the sandwich for your machine. I have a Big Shot here, and I'm just going to crank it through. And then when you pull it off, there is your image. Isn't that amazing? How detailed that is, and how that looks so much like metal, and yet it's not going to be sharp. It's not, you know, you don't have to worry about it rusting or damaging any of your photos. It's just embossing powder and a piece of cardstock. Now to add a little additional texture to this, I'm going to use one of our 3D enamel gels. This one happens to be Mars Black. And you just take the top off. When you get these, the top has to be snipped with scissors, but there's also a little filler piece underneath. So when you first get them, just take the cap off and remove that piece. The first one that I got, I couldn't figure out why I kept snipping and couldn't get it. So that was why. There's a little piece of paper in the middle to protect it during shipping that you need to remove. So I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of this onto my finger, and then I'm going to use my finger and just wipe it on here, as much or as little as you want. And it kind of goes in the little grooves. It discolors the surface a little bit too, but it really goes in the grooves and helps it really stand out. And then you just keep doing this. My Mars Black is almost gone. Because I use it so much. Just keep doing this around and around until you get the effect that you want. And it takes just seconds to dry because you're putting it on so thin. But isn't that amazing? It's just really textured, really in depth. And all you've done is use a couple products that you already probably have. Some embossing powder and cardstock and an embossing folder, and you've made this amazing texture that you can then add to your page like this. Thanks for watching.